Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY video here about good old Athena. If you're new to my channel, this lovely looking boat here behind me is Athena. She's a 1987 Warrior 38 and I am slap dab in the middle of a somewhat extensive refit. The end goal is for my girlfriend Eva and I to be able to move aboard in roughly 2 years. Over the summer I have made decent progress both below and above the waterline. The first thing I did was to finish an osmosis treatment below the waterline. We laid up extra glass on the side of the hull, faired the hull, which was a complete delight by the way, applied barrier coat, and then finally I got 6 coats of copper coat on the bottom. I then moved on to the deck, fairing the cabin top, applying Sigmadur 280 primer, and then last weekend I got the first coat of top coat on the cabin top and the cockpit. I've got a total of 5 coats of Sigmadur 550 on here. You might ask, why so many coats? Well, because the finish is not perfect, and for me to get the finish I want, I'm gonna have to do some sanding and some polishing, but we'll get back to that later in this video. Today is Thursday, September 27, and this coming weekend is my last final weekend here in the shed. After this weekend, Athena's going to get moved outside into the rain, snow, and just general unpleasantness. And as you can see, the only thing covering up the holes for the port lights here is a bit of paper. I might be wrong, but I doubt that paper is going to keep out a lot of rain, so I would love to get the port lights mounted again. But for me to be able to do that, it would be awesome if I could, at the very least, sand and polish the areas around those port lights this weekend, so I don't have to remove the port lights to do that again later on. I've cranked the temperature here inside the boat up to an uncomfortable 30 degrees Celsius. Sigmadur 550 takes 4 days to fully cure at 20 degrees Celsius, but only 3 days at 30 degrees Celsius, and I am very pressed for time. It's not so bad in the forward cabin, but in here in the saloon, it is absolutely sweltering. But of course, for it to remain sweltering in here, I need more kerosene. Okay, that should be good for another 12 hours. Okay, let's get out of here. As you can see, I've also got a great big gaping hole here on top of the cabin top. The old hatch was cracked and it wasn't looking too hot. And earlier last year, I replaced the other 3 hatches here on deck. So of course, the power of OCD compelled me to go ahead and buy one final new hatch. This is a Vetus Magnus 5151 hatch. This is identical with the other 3 hatches I've got up on deck, so now everything matches. The cool thing about the Vetus Magnus hatches is the fact that they are dimensionally identical to the Luma Ocean series. They're just a little bit cheaper. This one was around $200 cheaper than the Lumar hatch. And if this, for whatever reason, doesn't last, well, I can always switch it out with a Lumar hatch later on. Hi guys, it is Friday afternoon and it looks like Santa came early this year. Look at all these goodies. Most of them are sanding or polishing related, and what's better than that? Nothing. This does certainly feel like Christmas. I've got a new polisher here. This is the GPO 14 in my favorite blue color from Bosch. I've got a 3M backing pad and a compounding pad for said polisher. A ton of high grit sandpaper to last me, well, basically a lifetime. Some of these newfangled abrasives on a foam backing. I've got Aprolon from Mirka, which is a well-known brand, and I've got some of a different brand here. I figured it would be fun to do a bit of a comparison between the two. 2 different kinds of butyl-based caulk for the port lights and the hatch. A mountain of stainless machine screws, nuts and bolts for the port lights and other deck hardware. I am super excited to take this guy for a spin, but first there is a lot of sanding to deal with, so let's head up and see if the top coat is ready for sanding. I've never tried wet sanding and polishing paint before, so this is going to be another first for me. The issue with the paint job is that, well, this is basically the world's whitest orange. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but as you can hopefully see, this is not exactly a mirror finish, or at least it's not a very good mirror. The goal is to sand away all of these little imperfections, and I am hopeful that by the time I'm done, I'll be able to count my eyelashes in my reflection. Most of the cabin top is going to get covered in kiwi grip, and that is good news because that means I don't need to worry about sanding it, but it's also good news because it gives me a perfect little test area. If it turns out that the paint is not cured enough that I can sand it and I mess up an area up here, it doesn't matter because nobody's ever gonna see it. So let's go ahead and give this a go. I want to start with the least aggressive sandpaper that'll do the job. The problem is I don't know what grit that is. I've got some 600 here and I think that's a good place to start. I also got one of these soft interface pads. If I understood the sales jargon correctly, the soft interface pad is going to make it a little less likely that I'm going to sand through the surface. And also this is going to protect the somewhat expensive backing pad on my 150 Turbo. And speaking of my favorite sander, here it is. Let's go ahead and get this thing on there. Okay, I think that was the easy part. When I did my research prior to buying any kind of products, one of the things I found interesting was the fact that you are supposed to use water, but you're supposed to use the right amount of water, not too little and not too much. Apparently if you use too much water, the sandpaper is just going to be aquaplaning across the surface, and that's not going to be great. So let's see if I can get this right. A couple of squirts for the paper and a couple of squirts for the surface. Wow, that was very quick. This is not going to be that bad, I don't think. I'm going to show you a clip of what the surface looked like before sanding. And as you can see, the surface is like a big giant white orange. And now I'm going to show you what the surface looks like now. As you can see, when I get to the area I've been sanding up here, most of those tiny little low spots are gone. This is just nice and super flat. I want to jump into the deep end of the pool and get started sanding the forward edge of the cabin top here. This is where it really matters. Before I get started, I want to switch out the 600 grit for some 800 grit, just to see what kind of a difference that makes. Removing those high spots with the 600 grit paper was very fast, and I don't mind sacrificing a bit of that speed if it means I've got less of a risk of messing everything up. And also, the finer the grit I start with, the less sanding I have to do overall. This looks absolutely perfect. I can't quite count the number of eyelashes in my reflection yet, but this is 110% absolutely silky smooth, and that's the important thing for now. This is a good cautionary tale. In just a matter of seconds, the sandpaper chewed through the top coat on this hard edge here. Now it doesn't matter because that's going to get covered by the port lights. It's just a nice little wake-up call to make sure that I am very, very careful. I've spent about another hour just getting familiar with the process, and no doubt about it, this is going to be time-consuming, but I'm going to be able to get the finish I want. I just have to be careful. And getting the finish I want is all that's important. It doesn't matter if it takes a day more or a day less. This is going to be spiffy. Good morning, guys. It is Saturday morning. Who's excited for a full 12-hour day of sanding and polishing? I know I am. I'm hoping that once I'm done sanding the surface with 800 grit that I can then use this cutting compound from 3M to bring the surface all the way up to a finish that I'm satisfied with. On paper, this stuff is pretty freaking amazing. It will remove sanding scratches from grit 800 and up, and as you use it, it gets less and less abrasive, so by the time you're done, it should leave you with a nice finish. The only issue is, this stuff is designed specifically for gel coat and not for finishing paint jobs. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I've got my little test area up here from yesterday that I sanded with 800 grit. Why don't we just go ahead and give this a quick test on this area here. That, to my amateur eye, doesn't actually look bad. This is certainly as glossy as any gel coat boats out there. There are a few microscopic issues. Even with the glory that is 4K, I can't seem to capture those issues, and they are really tiny issues. I need to have my eye around, well, a couple of inches from the surface to be able to see them. So yeah, I think this is perfectly acceptable. Now that I think about it, this tiny little area that I sanded here yesterday, that got sanded with 600 grit. I've switched to 800 grit since then, so the finish everywhere else should be even better than the finish I saw here. Certainly good enough. The only thing that's really important this weekend is that I get the areas right around the frames of the port lights finished to a standard I think is okay. If I want to go ahead and sand the rest of this next summer with grit 3000 or 4000 or whatever madness, well, I can go ahead and do that. I just would much prefer not to have to remove the port lights. I think I've spent enough time yammering on this morning. Let's cue up some music and get started on the glorious sanding. Well, that was certainly 6 hours well spent. The sides of the cabin top are all sanded with 800 grit all the way back to the cockpit. Next up, cutting compound. I am in no way a professional at this. In fact, this is my first time ever using a polisher, and I might be doing all kinds of stuff wrong, but you know what? I am happy with the result. The starboard side over here is the before shot, and then over here on the port side, we've got the after shot. That's a pretty big improvement. Good morning, guys. It is Sunday morning. Today is port light reinstallation day. Woohoo! I spent a little over 12 hours yesterday sanding and polishing. I am done with the areas along the cabin top where the port lights are, the area around the hatch on top of the cabin top, and the area on top of the cabin top next to the companionway. Without a doubt, I am 100% satisfied with the result. And don't worry about this area being super slippery. Athena's fiberglass dodger is gonna cover this area, so nobody's gonna be walking around on this stuff. But look at the shine. Woo, that is nice. 3M has a really cool little guide about finishing surfaces with some of their products. Now there is a section in that guide that talks about finishing a painted surface. That is not the guide I've been following here. I've just been using this stuff like I mentioned earlier, and this is intended for gel coat. This is also described in that little guide, and it is well worth checking out if you've got some oxidation on your gel coat or just want to give your boat a shine. I'll include a link for that guide down in the description. 2 years ago, I purchased all new port lights for Athena with the exception of the 2 port lights in the cockpit. I had to remove them to rebuild the deck, but today I can finally go ahead and reinstall them. And that means no more stupid tarp over the boat this coming winter. For bedding the port lights, I'm going to be using a butyl-based caulk. If you're located in the UK, you might be familiar with Abromast. I believe the stuff that I'm going to be using is the same stuff, just a different brand. I don't know what you guys in the UK are trying to compensate for, but why, oh why, are your caulking doohickeys a few centimeters longer than the ones we've got over here? Of course, that doesn't matter until you, full of excitement, order a few of these doohickeys because you've heard that the stuff is awesome, and you go to put it in your caulking gun and figure out that, well, it doesn't fit. Oh, cruel fate to be kicked in the nads thusly. Putting aside my caulk-based frustration, the first step is going to be to drill a bunch of holes, and it looks like that is going to be 7mm holes. That is 100 holes drilled, and as you can see, I've gone ahead and test fitted the port lights. Installing the port lights is a little bit of a fiddly process because I'm here on my own. I don't have anybody to help me, but let me show you. First thing is to make sure that the back part of the port light actually matches the front. I did label everything before putting them away, but just to make absolutely sure. This looks perfect. The port lights are secured by machine screws and these fiddly bits here. Now I am sure these have an official name, but I don't know it, so I am going to go with fiddly bit. And the fiddly bit sits in the inside part of the port light. And this is where it gets a little bit annoying to do this on your own, because some of these are a little bit loose, like for instance this guy here. So this needs a bit of tape to make sure it doesn't just go spinning while I'm trying to tighten the machine screw. And just to make absolutely sure I don't run into any problems, each and every one of these gets a little piece of tape. And of course I don't want this tape to get caught between the port light and the frame or underneath the frame, so each bit of tape gets folded up neatly. Well, kind of neatly. With both of these taped up, I can do a quick little test fit just to make sure that everything lines up. And yep, that looks perfect. I've gone ahead and put a little B on the bottom. The next step is to get these taped in place inside the boat. B goes on the bottom, and again, this would be a lot easier if I had someone here to help me. Next step is to get some caulk on the frames. I'm going to go with 2 thin beads on each side of the tiny little holes here. Okay, there we go. And now it is just a matter of starting from the middle and working my way out to pull the port light in. The port light is pulled all the way in, and as you can see, there is a little bit of squeeze out. That's perfect. That brings us to the final step, which is cleanup. As you can see, I haven't bothered putting down masking tape or anything like that, and that's because just as with butyl tape, this butyl-based caulk is really easy to clean up. Here I've got a rag with just a drop of white spirit on here. Now it's just a matter of wiping away. Cleanup only took a couple of minutes, and I'm now ready to move on to the next port light. It's a couple of hours later and I am done with the port lights, but there are still a couple of steps left before Athena is actually rainproof again. For instance, the companionway hatch. I am going to reuse the old tracks, but they look like they could use a tiny bit of cleaning up. Sadly, I haven't painted the companionway hatch yet, but I can easily do that over this winter, and for now, as long as I get it on there, it'll be fine. And also, it'll be kind of fun to see what kind of a color difference there's between the new paint and the old gel coat. It is not unlikely that I at some point want to replace those tracks because they look kind of iffy. So I'm gonna bed this with just a tiny bit of the butyl-based caulk. Fingers crossed, this thing still fits. Whew. The only thing stopping the hatch from sliding back out are these two little screws here, so I better get those in there too. Ta-da! Athena now again has a functional companionway hatch. Well guys, this is where I'm gonna have to stop this weekend's video. Athena is not fully ready to go back outside yet, but that's okay. I've got tomorrow after work to deal with the last little bits. There was a bunch of other stuff I wanted to include in this video, but I am sadly out of time. Like I mentioned, tomorrow I'll fix the last little stuff aboard Athena, and then Tuesday she's gonna go outside. I think next weekend's video we're gonna start with her moving out of the shed, but we'll see how that goes. That is going to be it for this video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!